Wars, politics, and exile.
My life coincided with turbulent times. When I moved to Berlin in 1914, the world was plunging into the First World War. I, a staunch pacifist, watched in horror as my colleagues signed manifestos in support of the conflict. While many exalted the war as proof of national greatness, I raised my voice against violence. This stance isolated me, but I never silenced myself. After the war, Germany faced profound crises: hunger, inflation, political instability. Even so, science flourished, and I continued with my research. Yet, a far greater shadow began to rise: Nazism. Because I was Jewish, my ideas were attacked not only in the scientific field but also politically. They called my theory Jewish physics and tried to discredit it based on hatred, not arguments. When Adolf Hitler came to power in 1933, I knew I could no longer remain in Germany. My properties were confiscated, my name added to enemy lists of the regime, and even a bounty was placed on my head. Elsa and I left for the United States, where I accepted a position at Princeton University. It was painful to leave Europe, but I understood there was no other path. In the US, I found refuge and respect. But I also saw how the world was heading toward another disaster. The Second World War loomed, and this time my relationship with politics and science would become even more complex. I always declared myself a pacifist, but in the face of Hitler's threat to conquer the world and develop unimaginable weapons, I felt I could not simply observe. In 1939, along with other scientists, I signed a letter sent to President Franklin Roosevelt warning about the possibility of Germany building an atomic bomb. This letter, often attributed to me, helped launch the Manhattan Project. Even though I did not directly participate in the bomb's construction, this decision weighed on my heart forever. Knowing that my science had been used to create mass destruction was one of the greatest sorrows of my life. When Hiroshima and Nagasaki were devastated, I wept for humanity. I asked myself, had I helped open Pandora's box? At the same time, in the US, my image solidified not only as a scientist but also as a public intellectual. I criticized racism, supported civil rights, and advocated for peaceful coexistence among peoples. I believed science only made sense if it served humanity. My image as a smiling genius with untamed hair and a distracted expression was known worldwide. But behind that image was a man in conflict, someone who carried the weight of discoveries and their consequences. Science had given me fame and recognition, but it also placed me before deep moral dilemmas. During that period, I understood a harsh truth: human knowledge could illuminate or destroy depending on who used it. And that truth would accompany me for the rest of my life.
The final years and legacy.
After the Second World War, my life entered a new phase. I was no longer just the scientist recognized for my equations, but also a moral voice in the world stage. I became a defender of nuclear disarmament precisely because I felt the responsibility for what had happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I spent years warning world leaders about the dangers of atomic war, pleading for cooperation and peace. Many listened, but few had the courage to follow that path. Settled in Princeton, United States, I lived a simple routine. I did not care for elegant clothes or social conventions. I often appeared at lectures wearing the same worn-out sweater or without socks, something that amused and intrigued people. My messy hair became almost a symbol, but to me, it was just negligence. I used to say I had no time for small things, as my mind was occupied with the universe. In my final years, I sought a theory that would unify the laws of physics, the so-called unified field theory. I wanted to find an equation capable of uniting gravity with the forces of the quantum world. I devoted decades to this search, but I never managed to complete the work. Many say I failed, but I believe I left clues for other scientists to one day follow. That is how science works. Each generation opens paths for the next. Although I was often seen as a genius, I never considered myself special. I always said my only advantage was being stubborn. I like to remind people that imagination was more important than knowledge because knowledge is limited, but imagination can take us anywhere. In my later years, I also drew closer to philosophical questions. I wondered about God, about the meaning of life, and about the harmony of nature. Many called me an atheist, but I always rejected that label. I did not believe in a personal God who interferes in human life, but rather in a mysterious order, almost poetic, inscribed in the laws of physics. To me, studying the universe was a way of approaching the divine. I spent my final days in Princeton, still writing, still questioning, still restless. When my health began to decline, I refused invasive treatments. I knew my journey was coming to an end, and I did not fear death. Leaving was part of the same natural order I had so deeply admired. I died on April 18, 1955. At the age of 76, I left behind not only theories and papers, but a way of seeing the world. My life showed that curiosity can change the course of humanity. It showed that science is not only numbers and formulas, but also ethics, courage, and responsibility. Today, my name is remembered as a synonym for genius, but what I truly wish is that my story inspires every person never to give up the pursuit of knowledge. After all, the true miracle is not to fully understand the universe, but to never lose the ability to be amazed by it.
Beyond time, Einstein's enduring influence.
You might think my story ended in 1955 with my last breath in Princeton, but in truth, it did not. My name, my work, and even my image continued to live on, far beyond my own existence. Few scientists become cultural icons, and yet somehow I did. My face, with unruly hair and a mischievous smile, became a universal symbol of genius, printed on posters, t-shirts, and murals around the world. But more important than my image were the ideas I left behind. Relativity reshaped not only physics, but also technology. Today, satellites that guide your GPS must account for the warping of time predicted in my equations. Without it, your phone could not even locate you. My work on light laid the foundations for quantum mechanics, which in turn gave birth to lasers, semiconductors, and the very computers that now power your age. Strangely, I became more than a scientist. Writers, musicians, and filmmakers turned me into a character, sometimes serious, sometimes playful. For many, I embodied the idea that imagination and curiosity are the real engines of progress. Even my famous phrase, "Imagination is more important than knowledge," continues to inspire dreamers of every generation. Of course, I was not flawless. I made mistakes both in life and in science. I resisted some of the radical implications of quantum mechanics, and I sometimes failed in my personal relationships. But perhaps that is why my story resonates, because I was not a myth, but a human being struggling to reconcile brilliance with imperfection. In the end, what remains is not just equations written on paper, but the spirit of inquiry itself. My true legacy is the reminder that the universe is vast, mysterious, and still full of unanswered questions, and that anyone with enough curiosity and perseverance can help illuminate its secrets. So, if my voice still reaches you today, let it be to say this: never stop questioning. Never accept easy answers. The world belongs to those who dare to wonder.